Raymond has been publishing some very interesting case studies and approaches about his LLM visibility plan and execution for his clients. Raymond, thank you for joining me today. Why don't you give us a quick intro of what you are up to with SyncScribe?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here. SyncScribe is really an AI native agency that's focusing on B2B businesses. We typically work with Series A startups to up to enterprises. Our fundamental research is in the area of AI native research on like how AI agents make decisions around certain product and particularly the B2B space. A little bit background on myself. I'm a software engineer building the product over here, and we are really excited about where AI is going as a technology as well. Trying to build like a software factory within the company to have our own AI agents and stuff. I'm also a hacker and like taking things apart. I use it in the crypto space and I make money by hacking. That's relevant because I see SEO and GEO or the whole agentic discovery as an engineering problem. Like it's a problem, can be engineered. You can have a playbook with it. Before this call, you talk about fermentations and lab. That's something that I don't see people doing enough in this space. They're just like echo chamber of each other. Very few labs actually use their own original report, and that's what we try to do.
Right. Were you in the SEO space before you started SyncScribe?
No, I was in the government. I was leading teams, running one of the biggest teams in the Singapore government. And I got bored, was very interested in blockchain. 2021-ish, left to do a crypto startup where I am the CTO. We went through multiple pivot hell. And I was like, wait, man, I need to learn GTM. One thing led to another, and here am I doing SEO.
The first thing I usually ask my guests in the Geo LLM ranking space, what do you think are the top 3 ranking factors right now when it comes to LLM visibility?
Okay, that's pretty good. I'll do a top level and then dive deep, right? So the first one is keyword match, whether you're matching what is being searched for. The second is metadata, and the third one is whether you're followed, right? So for keyword match, it's LM is not too different from the engine anyway. Although there's a recent change in the last, I think 30, 40 days. I think ChatGPT recently changed their provider and went to a different provider, and there's a different thing altogether right now. But keyword matching is still primarily one of the most important things. Then the second one is meta title. That will go into actually 3 main things: title of the page, description of the page, and updated page. This is actually related to the first one on keyword match. This is important because only about 6% of web pages that get searched and presented in front of LM actually get read. It doesn't mean that just because you're appearing on the search engine result page, they will get read. So those 3 are very important. Then the last one is the obvious followability, where once you have hit the site, can it actually be accessed by agent at all? Those will be the 3 main things.
Interesting 3 points. So we'll dive into those. But before I jump into that, what's your take on the training data? So there are 2 aspects, right? The training data and then the live retrieval of citations. In your experience, which one has more weight, the training data or the citation?
Definitely the training data. But then if you're going to say that only, then there's nothing you can do about anything right now. So we would rather think of it as like a timeline where in the next 3 to 6 months, if you're a new company entering the space, the only way in is through the search retrieval data, right? So that's what you need to do. But once you got onto that, then you get into the training data for the next release of the LLM itself. On the longevity point of view, it's definitely better to be in the training data in the 12 months and kind of that's it, right? You got to think about how LLM operate from a business point of view, right? From that point, every time they search, it costs them money because they are paying third-party provider. For instance, now we know that ChatGPT uses right data as their search engine, which actually filter down to Google and God knows what, and they do some kind of like processing after that as well. LLMs, as much as possible, are trying to reduce search, right? So in certain cases, it's definitely better to be in training data so that you can have that, but you can't just click your finger and just appear in it, right? Then you have to go through via search. Something that we noticed is that you can use the biases of training data against the search engine.
Let's jump into that.
Yes.
Biases. Can you give a simple explanation of what you mean by biases and then the manipulation side?
Okay. So if you think about it, the LMs are already trained on a lot of data. By nature, if you ask what's the best, let's say, API for GTM engineers for buyer intent data, right? What happens is that if you look at ChatGPT doing the search, it does this thing called fanout. We can capture in the network logs. Sometimes they show it on the UI itself, but it's definitely inside the network log. So if you can capture that part, you could see what kind of queries come up. This is a pattern that we see starting as far back as November, more pronounced right now, is that when you search for, let's say, best something, they no longer fan out the query directly of like best what. They will append what they think is the best. Let's say in this space will be Apollo, Zoom Info, maybe 2 or 3 more products. You can see there's obvious biases that the LM has already because it thinks that these are the best players. So naturally, you get more product that surface from the biases of the search term itself. Now, how do you gamify this? How do you use this to your advantage?
I'm getting excited.
If they are listing 3 companies out there, and if you write an article, A vs B vs C vs your company, who has the best query intent?
Crazy. That is mind-blowing. I think on your side was the first time I saw versus B versus C. We've always done A versus B, but never done A versus B versus C.
A 2-way, 4-way match. is actually the top alpha right now. It's not a random pair. We didn't just do a combinatrix of all the products and decided LM had the bias, we just use it against that.
Are you saying that you track the brands that are showing up in query fanouts and just create comparison articles along with those brands?
You could.
You could.
I'm saying you could.
Great. You could, yeah. That is a very, very solid tip there.
We are also seeing something similar. This will fall into the category of neutrality, where is there a neutral third party that cites you as well? And Claude is one of the many ways. In fact, very big businesses have been employing this. Do you know Wise has this job description where they were hiring SEO specialists for what they call owned site? I forgot the exact name for it, but the idea here is that it's a third-party site that actually gives you the rate across different payment provider, and they are using it to actually funnel traffic back into Wise as well. So big companies also have similar strategy. They're trying to have more neutral third party, but it's actually owned by them as well.
Yep, the head CEO for Wise is a very smart guy, and I think he just moved to Revolut. Adding to your strategy of influencing the data, what's your take on creating own network of websites? First, for influencing training data. Second, EMDs that also start ranking for various terms. A whole combination of these kind of sites, right? What's your take on this, and what are the pros and cons?
Yeah. So very interesting thing about EMDs. We ran an experiment there and it was like super validating. If you search for hardware compliance, let me just do a quick one right now. Yeah, that's my company. The EMD is literally called hardware compliance, and hardware compliance is a complete field by itself. We took one day to basically launch the site, and within the week itself, we were number one and getting real business inquiries into these things. So EMD indeed is a playbook. So that's as much as I would say on the exact domain match part. One thing that we realized that both Google as well as ChatGPT, they penalize right now is those sites that doesn't have a real products and services. So it doesn't make sense if you just create sites for the blog or AI journal of sorts, unless you're buying the edge domains kind of things. Yet another plane. You don't actually run a lot of experiments in this space, but we know for a fact we ran something and that these are happening. New sites, blog sites are no longer relevant. In fact, we get outreach all the time on who and who DR76 is like. No, that's just can have like DR60 relevant, DR36 but relevant product, real SaaS, so linking to us, and that is so much valuable than this crazy DR76 company that blog about every day. There are some strategy that will work, some strategy that doesn't work, but it all hinges on does that thing that you're creating the network on resembles a real product and services.
From LM point of view, do you think these EMDs can influence the training data?
Certainly. If you think about how LM training data is actually being done, right? It's through IDA, iterative distillated amplifications, something along that line. The idea is that if you have a lower model, let's say M1 is your base model, right? Let's say ChatGPT 3.5. How you train ChatGPT 4 on 3.5 is you give 3.5 access to something else, let's say web access, tool access, compute environment, where you can run code and stuff. After that, you run tons of queries over it, and then you use that to train the model for ChatGPT 4, right? Now, 4 comes by, and then you get a next variation, you add your AI harnesses around it, and then you give it access to tools and whatnot, then the next variation comes up. Of course, it's far more complex than this because the method of training is different, but in terms of how it actually gets iterated and distilled, this is actually how it's being done. So you definitely need to be in the search space first before you actually can win in the the foundation model training data.
Getting back to the top 3 pointers you had mentioned, keyword matching and meta data. Do you think it applies to every single niche, or there are variations where keyword matching and metadata does not work to that extent?
No, because where we got this is actually from ChatGPT own activity itself. I talked about this recent change of the provider going to bright data, right? So one of the things that we see consistently being surfaced back into the LM is the 3 things, right? Title, description, updated date. So updated date was quite interesting for us because we didn't think that that would be important, but it turns out to be one of the metadata that got captured and filtered down. So imagine it's more like LM is also looking at this is like, which of this looks interesting? It's number one, they're looking for a few things, right? Number one, does it validate my core LM understanding? Number two, what is it surprising that I didn't capture that is outside of my training data set? So they know their own cutoff, which is, let's say, it's in June. Then I'll know anything in July 2026, it's going to be outside. So I'm more interested to read into the July stuff than things that were in November last year.
Okay, so do you think LLMs are not able to figure out, oh, this was the same article that I had already crawled or read before?
They can't tell.
They can't tell.
They can't tell.
Okay.
So it's more like, does it validate what I have? Is there something interesting? So where it is the something interesting, we talked about this. We talked about listicle. We talked about, I think we talked about the documentation. Another category of things that get cited quite often, press release style content. Who and who launched this, and then you have the date. It's super powerful because when they look at it, they're like, dated after the training date, something that is new, that is outside of my training data, new angle, I'll read that.
Great.
So press releases are also coming back.
I'm just very careful of releasing press releases that are syndicated, copy paste kind of content syndicated on a network of 100 or 200 with no variations and carrying the client's link as well. For me, something like that can trigger, a Google penalty as well. So press releases are definitely great, but needs to be done very carefully and just making sure it's not leaving any footprints.
Yep. Press release style. So you don't even have to pay anyone for it.
What's your secret sauce here?
So if you're a company, let's say Versal, you'll just be like, Versal's launch new AI agent SDK for XYZ and post it on Versal blog itself. You don't need to syndicate it.
So you can basically do this for any niche, any category. For example, XYZ brand launched this new service in London and they're going to be this is great information.
Yeah. If you do paid press release, then the sequence of events looks like this, right? So you do that first on your own site for the first cut. Then obviously you create another content that is in similar angle, going after slightly different keywords, but same kind of semantics in that sense, and distribute that through the press network. Then the press network in the first line itself link to your press release.
Man, this is solidly.
So your own content is not duplicated with those that are distributed out.
1 second, I'm just making notes here. Let's get into something that you shared with me earlier, agentic discovery. What is agentic discovery? Let's start from there.
Going back out, right? So we think about it in three phases, right? So one, SEO is like humans searching on Google, right? We have been trained to do keyword research. Then we come the next phase, which is right now, GEO or AEO or whatever you call it, humans searching on ChatGPT. Now, the thing is that, the world is evolving quite quickly. More people are going actually to co-work where it's helping you do certain things by itself, right? It can connect to NCP, act on you and all that. And there's not quite a name or, people haven't quite converged onto it just right there. So we name it agentic discovery, where it's basically agents searching and making decisions for their users, right? The winning criteria is that you need to be the default solution that is being chosen for you to win there. And that's how we look at agentic discovery. And if you think about it, there's a lot of company converging into that and a lot of protocols that's pointing to that right now. So you have the agentic commerce. Basically, if you can buy stuff off ChatGPT, that would actually funnel back into whether you can actually do more actions there. There's agentic payments, which then is the other part of the agentic commerce where, hey, can I actually give my AI agent a credit card or maybe a stablecoin wallet, and then it can just buy stuff for me. And all I need to do is like, hey, I'm going on a business trip to Phuket. This state, help me book something. And my agent would know that I don't like night flights. I prefer a little bit of layover, explore the city or whatever, but not on business trips. And it can make all those decisions for me. And where that is interesting and give a lot of business to people like us is this, right? Look, the agent has to go to a booking platform, right? It's going to look up Agoda, Booking, maybe Singapore Air. But guess what? If it's a $4 difference in the price and one of them has an agent protocol that it can make the action easily, it's going to pick that $4 more expensive stuff and get the work done.
So agentic discovery is basically SEO for agents?
Yeah, SEO for agents. So it comes to two layers. One layer is discovery, right? Discovery will be like the typical SEO geo. The second part is to navigate and take action.
Since it involves agents, and definitely the SaaS niche is where this works really well in. Do you think brands that are not in the SaaS niche, regular local businesses, right, can use this strategy to take advantage of when LLM crawlers are coming on their side and checking for some things? I provide better data or information compared to my competitors. Can something like that be done?
Yeah, definitely. So you're right that because SaaS is like at the frontier of technology, they're usually the first one to adopt it. And they adopt it more in-house and having internal capabilities. But what happens is that we start to see there are horizontals that are more infrastructure stuff that is happening as well. So if you take a look at, let's say, agentic commerce on ChatGPT, when it was first launched, Shopify was already a partner. So then it's actually more of an infra play between the big platforms, whether they support certain things natively. If I want my style to appear on ChatGPT, I could go and beg for an API access to ChatGPT to upload my stuff, which they will reject me and tell me wait until the end of the year, maybe. Or I can use Shopify today and it's already natively integrated.
Yeah. Are there any guidelines for agentic discovery? Like how we were talking about top 3 ranking factors for LLM ranking. Same way for agentic discovery, any 3 or 5 must have guidelines to win the agentic race.
Okay, this is where it gets very muddied water. And we actually did a big research piece on this. We look at who are the winners on agentic discovery. It's typical SaaS, right? So Vercel, Resend, Convex, Claude. The hard part about making sense of this research, was this the factor that got them there in the first place? Or did they won regardless and they still did this to just maintain a little bit of a distance that competitor cannot close up on very quickly? So that is something that we are still not able to pull it apart. We typically call it like confounding factors. Our research starting to show, okay, these are things that we see in the top sites, but it's still a good to have. There is not enough data in certain sense to prove that it impacts. So for instance, llms.txt, we know for a fact right now that is good for layer 2. I talk about 2 layers, right? Layer 1 being discovery, layer 2 being ability to act and navigate. llms.txt, it's definitely able to help with the second part. We don't know for a fact if it helps with the discovery at all. And if you look at Reddit, a lot of the marketers says the same thing and people stand on 2 sides at the same time. There's just not enough research to show it actually helps you with getting discovered in the first place. But if you're expecting agents to take actions on your website or learn documentation and stuff, that is a must-have. So we split every single LMS. Do you need it? Where it's useful? Where is it not? Let's say .md site. Is it useful? Is it not? So we split it by all these various criteria and go down to it. Yeah, but right now it's very muddied and we are still updating the research to see like which are the ones that matters the most. And Google recently published this thing called agentic resource discovery. And it is also, we are also trying to make sense of how much of it is really the discovery part and how much of it is the second part as well. Yeah.
There's been a lot of debate and analysis around this llms.txt and llm.txt file, especially a lot of SEOs who like to make analysis of ranking factors. I think recent past few months, at least what I heard is that these are not the ranking factors. llms.txt and lms.txt are not the ranking factors.
Yeah,
I want to know, but I want your take on in what sense lms.txt and llm.txt files are useful and whether we should put effort in it or not.
It depends on your capabilities. If you don't have in-house capability, you're e-commerce and you're just using platforms anyway, you work through an agency, I'll say don't bother with it. Don't spend another $1,000, $3,000 on this stupid LMS thing. It doesn't work for you. Right? It's not worth it. If you already have in-house engineering team, they're vibe coding, it costs absolutely nothing because you run it on Claude code anyway. It's just 2 instructions away. Hey, do it.
But from agentic discovery point of view, do they play any part in that sense?
They do. In the navigation of it, we have seen that it has been pulling the data there, right?
Okay.
But in fact, it is less useful than the .md version. So LMS require the agent to actively search out like this text file. So there's the active part of it. You can turn it into a passive mode by looking at the fingerprinting of the agent coming to your site, as well as change your content type to markdown text only. That will make it a lot more passive, right? Where agents will use this as a default, and then it received a much more passable versions of it. So this is actually a more preferred method than llms.txt. I think one of the SEO guys, he actually wrote about this in a blog that also mimic that. If you're using an agent to crawl it, you see it in the markdown version. So this one is definitely much better than LMS text, but LMS text itself is useful, just not for the discovery layer.
Right. So it's not a ranking factor, but once the agent is on your side, it's making it easier and faster for it to discover the important things.
Exactly.
Great. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions when it comes to LLM visibility and LLM ranking?
I think they think of it as like different from SEO. It's very much the same. The only two differences we talk about it. One is the query pattern. The distribution curve of long tail query is more fat tailed right now. That means 100% of the time it's going to be 7-8 words or more, right? So it's more fat tail right now. Very different from keyword research. So you approach it the same way, but different in terms of like the target keyword. Then the second point that is different is the biases, which we just talked about earlier.
Do you have any criteria for writing content? You did mention the title, the meta description, these are important. And that's been something we've been following as well, that the first 30% of the article is crucial. That's where the LLMs are extracting most of the information. What's your suggestion for people when they want to write content that's helpful for LLM rankings?
What you talked about, very important. So few things that we always have TLDR. We usually make it like 3-4 points. And the last line is usually talking about your product. So you kind of like sneak your product and services into like the TLDR. And the last one, just glue it back to like how your product and services is relevant to this topic that you're talking about, right? So leverage on that. TLDR is very important. The next part is also objectivity. This used to be not so important in, let's say, November, that period. But right now we are starting to see LMs having a judge layer to judge for objectivity. So if you citing yourself, it's less credible. But how you can make up for it is also talk about how you actually come about this ranking, what is your assessing factor. And also, it's usually not the case of like, this is the pure winner. It's more of like, let's say, you use this product if you're SME, you use this product if you're enterprise, if you use this where your costs, and LM will actually cite word for word if you do it.
That's my suggestion for people who ask whether we should publish fresh listicles or get added to all. If you are able to get placements in old without wasting much time, then make sure you add with a relevant, unique feature. So you stand out in the article and there's a differentiating factor.
Yeah. So then the other part is like informational density, because AI can do this, right? It asks them to write a 70,000 words page, they will, right? But whether it's going to be useful at all, right? So try to keep it dense. Then again, there's a different category of content that we also see winning. It's landscape scan, right? In the SEO world, try to make sense of like, what's the latest in this category, right? So in SaaS, it will be email deliverability rate, or basically things that C-level being the decision makers of company to kind of read into like industry reports and stuff. Those things can be very long, right? And if you have a lot of statistics, that would be great. Something to note, we have noticed that if you are able to cite first-party source, it's much more better than if you end up citing this source that cites this source.
Okay, first parties. Okay.
Yeah. Because
what would you call proper information and not AI fluff? Because AI can just check out thousands of characters or words. What's your suggestion to make sure it's proper information dense and not just dense with AI fluff?
If you are going to do this manually, start off from your research and then look at what is actually corroborating what is said out there, because you still need a little bit of that for context setting. A big part of it should be what kind of value that you are adding to the world that is not in the original search results already, and then focus a little bit more on that. And then you go think about word count after. The wrong way to think about it is, I want 1,200 word article. And then you're like, okay, let me try to fill in all of that. It will always be 1,200 word article, right? But whether it's real value or not, you don't know. But if you started off with like, how best can I answer this query? And then like, actually I can do it in like 300 words, like, or two-liner, then just do the two-liner, right? That's a very information dense part of it.
Got it. That clarifies. When it comes to publishing content, you already mentioned publishing these versus article, brand A versus brand B versus brand C. What kind of content people should publish? There are listicles, there are comparison articles, buyer's guide, everything to feed into the training data. What's your strategy of what kind of articles should be published And the part 2 of that question is whether this should be published on your own site or on third-party sites.
So there is this very interesting research by Prompt Watch. They did a scan of data from, I think, January 1st of this year to February 4th. If you want, I can show you. Let me see if I can share screen. Yeah, there you go. Right. So this is the article I talk about. This is some of our training material. Original one, you can search up Prompt Watch. This is very interesting because top 1 is listicles, 2 and 3, landing page and product page. But for us, we kind of lump this as the same kind of things. Although if you're in e-com, obviously it's different. But if you take a look at this category, it makes up about 30% of what is being cited, right? So this will actually come up top in terms of listicle. So our go-to strategy first is definitely like better landing page and product pages. E-com is collection pages and the likes of it, right? News, this goes into my thing on press release. How to is something that I have not talked about. How to, it needs to be technical, right? There's, how to build a house. That's more technical, right? For instance, we have a customer for a LinkedIn plugin, right? Something technical would be how to set reminders for DM. That is a very technical how to, right? Where basically only your product serves it. So you'll be like, this is how you do it. And then you have to use our product to do it. So how to masquerade as a product thing works really well, by the way. And then the rest are just documentation. This, I'll say it's going to be higher right now. And of course, you've got to understand this study is based on a broad-based category agnostic like layer. If you go into SaaS, then you start to see this whole thing's move. Right. So our study shows that documentation is higher, but obviously if you're just a consumer market, which is across all category, who would read documentation? So if you look at it, it's like 2.3. No, it's not 2.3 because once you get into SaaS, that's huge. This is what we use. We try follow some of this research to form policies.
What's important for training data? Is it the same style of content?
One very cool nuance we had with one client. So they are e-commerce in India. And something interesting, first month we were working with them, we are like, we can definitely get you guys onto ChatGPT. We did, right? We're consistently being cited, but they are still not top ranked on the thing. Why? So this client, they are e-com cement distributors, sell to merchants and stuff. And that's where you realize the biases of the LLM actually plays a part in it, right? Because they assume that the local player, the small shops, are going to give you a better price than a large e-com player, which is untrue because you actually have economies of scale, right? You have better partnership. And there's also concern about authenticity of the product. LM does not know it. So what do? You put it into the title and description. You put it in places where they'll read it. And now when they read that thing again, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, yeah, my client first and then like local players because authenticity is questionable. And then, yeah, you get it.
Great strategy there. Before we started recording, you were talking about documentation sites.
Yes.
What's that strategy and how does that play out?
I guess this is a little bit more relevant for companies that sell software. Whereas you have a guide or documentation site. One of the things that we realized that's heavily weighted, especially in SaaS, is LM actually crawl quite deep into documentation site. I'm going to give you a very concrete example. I was searching for a CRM recently. What's the best CRM? I just want you to automate the ability to file and update the CRM for me. And I thought it would go with HubSpot or something. Turns out, no, it's reading through and it looked at HubSpot stuff and it read through Attio stuff. And then for Attio, it started reading into the MCP documentations and everything. And then it decided that HubSpot is good, popular. It has everything that everybody likes, trustworthy-ish. But then Attio, I actually crawled deep into it and I realized that I can actually do all the things that you said you want me to do. And I'm very confident about that. And it started recommending me Attio. And if you look at the sources, it's because it crawled through the whole documentation side.
And so how do people set up this documentation or what's the strategy to follow it properly?
Now, remember earlier in the call, I talked about infrastructure play, right? Right now, there's a good company in this space. They're called Mintlify. Their tagline, the knowledge platform built for agents, right? Okay. So they are a documentation site creator. Why do I recommend them is that as we were distilling down the ranking factor and how agents actually cross through site, we realized that Mintify has this out of the box. That means it's like the Shopify case. You want to be on ChatGPT, you just use Shopify. In this case, where if you don't want to set up llms.txt, you don't want to do the .md content type like redirections and stuff, they have it out of the box. So you just have to use them. I think they can connect to your code, to self-document to.
Right. And just to clarify, this whole strategy with documentation side, this is more on the agentic discovery level and not as per a ranking factor?
It does on ranking factor, GEO. In certain category, you see a lot of documentation site ranking quite high right now.
Is that because LMs found them to be more useful and that becomes a
No.
ranking factor?
Rather, if you think about it, traditionally marketing side is owned by the marketeers. Then the documentation side is owned by the product engineers, right? Or product marketing side. The product marketing side end up using a kind of language which is how to do this for that on that. If you look at the list, how to is one of the things, right? So if you look at the research, I think BUN,
Manik
BUN, B-U-N, this
Okay.
software thing. They were going crazy with the programmatic approaches, like how to do this and how to convert image, how to resize image, how to whatever, and chuck it all into like the documentation sites and stuff. The language that the engineers use are less fluffy. It's just like, to the point. How do you set up this? How do you send an email? How do you what? And that's what people and LMs really want. So when they search for those queries, they'll likely end up more on the documentation side than on the marketing side.
Makes absolute sense. Raymond, we can talk for another hour or two and will not be enough. And I think we'll just need to record multiple sessions in podcasts with you because this knowledge that you've shared, I mean, some of the things I haven't even heard or tested or tried before. Thank you so much, Raymond, for sharing so many knowledge bombs today. What's the best way for our listeners to follow you?
I'm available on LinkedIn. Just like look up Raymond Yeh. There's like maybe 2 Raymond Yeh in the world.
Thank you so much, Raymond.
Thank you very much for having me on. Thank you very much.